Your home for our Atlanta Falcons, Hawks, and Atlanta United. Your teams play here. Sports Radio 92.9, The Game.
Here's Dukes and Bell. John Fricke in for Mike today. And let's talk to our buddy Micheal Rothstein from ESPN. He covers the Falcons for ESPN. You follow him, check his stuff out. He does a great job. And Micheal, I want to start with the Desmond Ridder, critique here. Week one, we were all like, not sure what's going on. And I thought in the third and fourth quarter when we needed plays, he made plays in this game on Sunday, and I'm curious, what is your critique now after 2 weeks?
Yeah, I wrote about it actually yesterday on ESPN.com, which is he needs to start faster. He'll be the first one to admit it. If you listen to what he said the first 2 weeks of the season, he has often talked about needing to get into a rhythm. Now, they felt in the entirety of maybe the first three quarters in week one, that was an issue until they really just started running the ball. And so a lot, listen, Brian Burns and Derek Brown had a lot to do with that too, with Carolina. And then you saw it again early on in week two. I actually asked Desmond Ridder after the game, is this something that you just kind of, it's just take your time? Because there's some guys, you look at running backs, and some guys are volume guys, and some guys, that first carry, they're on, So I was like, are you kind of almost like an equivalent of that? And he was like, well, that's where you say. I'm like, well, you know you better than I know you. So what is it? And he essentially said, yeah, there could be something it takes me a minute to get in kind of get rolling. But that's not even new to this season. Go back to last year, 4 starts. That was one of the things I think that we knew about him then was he was much better in the fourth quarter than he was in the first. And I'll be honest, if you're a quarterback, if you're a coach, you probably take that from your quarterback because in the NFL, very rarely are you getting run like the Cowboys ran the Giants, right? Like more often than not, you're in the game in the fourth quarter, and if your guy is good in the fourth quarter, that's good. That to me has been a good thing. He was 6 to 8 on Sunday. There we go. That's the right day in the fourth quarter in the win against the Packers, and that mattered because it gave good balance to the passing game. He needs to be more accurate, specifically on deep throws. Can get rid of the ball a little quicker, but some of that's on the offensive line. But I think it's all about rhythm and consistency. But if you thought he was going to come out and be the most consistent quarterback in the NFL coming out of the gate, you have not watched a rookie quarterback or a second-year quarterback play.
Micheal Rothstein of ESPN covering the Falcons. Carl mentioned earlier in the show, Micheal, that in these first two games, 14-0 in the fourth quarter over Carolina, 13-0 in the fourth quarter against Green Bay, 27-0 in the first two games of the fourth quarter. But in the Green Bay game, the Packers only had 50 total snaps. Is it the design of Arthur Smith to try to, and make sure that his team is the fresher team in the fourth quarter? Was that why we see, to some degree, the success of the Atlanta Falcons based on Arthur Smith's ability to game plan early in the game to set up the fourth quarter?
Partially. I may be reading a little much into that, but partially. And it's funny because I asked Arthur Smith specifically, if you remember, in the first quarter, that goal line the goal line attempts from the 2 and the 1 that
first
got them
goal at the 1,
nowhere.
right? Yeah.
Right. And he even said, he's like, listen, don't know what would have happened with the 4th and 1 when they had the false start. But also he pointed that specifically one of those plays set up the touchdown that Desmond Ridder had later. My guess was that Bijan Robinson run that got stuffed into the line because they ran a read option on the goal line. If you remember, that was a very well-executed play by Desmond Ridder where him and Bijan sold that read option to Bijan because I was actually watching Bijan and I was like, oh, wait, what happened? And then you heard the crowd. I'm like, why are they cheering? He got stopped at the 4. And then I was like, oh, no, he has the ball. That's how good that read option was, that he fooled me up in the press box. But I think that was Arthur hasn't said that, but I'm guessing that play that they got stuffed on directly set up that play that ended up helping them win the game later. I think part of it is strategy, game plan, trying to set up defensive coordinators. I think some of it too is defensively how they've built their front. For the last 2 games, it's been very specific. Around 2/3 to 1/3, the first unit versus the second unit on the defensive line, and you can throw Brett Dupree in there a little bit, and really the edge guys. And that helps because in the fourth quarter, all of a sudden, your top guys, I'd have to go back and look at what the breakdown is of like how much like Grady and Calais are playing in the, and David Onyemata is playing in the fourth quarter. But my guess is you're getting fresher guys. Your top end guys are fresher later, and that allows for a little bit more pressure than anything we've seen because Grady was playing like 85% of the snaps it felt like the last two seasons, and he's definitely down more around 2/3 of the snaps this year, more or less. That matters in games, and that matters over the course of a season, and that's what Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot and Ryan Nielsen have been trying to build is that defensive line that has a lot of depth. And if there's one thing I think we have learned from the first 2 weeks of the season, definitively it is that they have that.
Michael, we got Drake going. What about Pitts? And what do you think as far as, his production here the first 2 weeks? First week it was, how does Drake not have a catch? Well, that's been answered, and we got him involved. What about Pitts?
I mean, listen, I'm going to be real with you guys. Like, they have a lot of offensive options. Not everybody can get the ball that much. I mean, they just can't, right? Like, where do Pitts – and this is not a knock on Kyle Pitts, but you're running the ball well. You want to get Bijan X amount of work. You got to get Tyler Algier X amount of work because you just know he's going to be a bastion of positive yards for you. I don't know. I think at some point they're able to do it, but teams are still paying a lot of attention to Kyle Pitts. And if they're going to say, okay, you're going to take Kyle Pitts out of it, why should Desmond Ridder force the ball into Kyle Pitts? Because this isn't like the last 2 years, guys. Like, it's not like Kyle Pitts is like the only option out there, and it's a bunch of, frankly, replacement-level players, and that's not a knock on some of those guys. But, I mean, Olamide Zaccheaus is, the fourth receiver in Philly?
Right.
Russell Gage was the third receiver in Tampa Bay. Those two guys were starting two receivers, starting receivers at points in the last 2 years, and it wasn't close. Like, they have so many offensive options now that if a team is going to say, you know what, going to completely take Kyle Pitts away, well, they've got 4 or 5 other guys that can make plays and make plays consistently, which they didn't have the last 2 years. And eventually teams are going to flip that because Drake London, or they're going to really load up on the run game with Bijan and with Tyler Algier. And guess what? Then that's going to leave Kyle Pitts in single coverage. And the one last thing I would say with Kyle Pitts is I'm not worried about it also because if you go back and think about it, what would an extra 26 yards be on his numbers right now in terms of whether we're having this conversation or not? And he had in that first game, he had a 26-yard reception taken away by an offensive penalty he had nothing to do with, and that really had nothing to do with even the ball getting out, and that wiped that out. Sometimes you have to look at those numbers too, in that those are the options and the opportunities, and if they get wiped out by penalty, well, those are things that are never going to ever count. So you look at the stat sheet and you don't see it, but it happened. And that even happened to an extent last year with Pitts, but to me right now through the first 2 weeks, that's why I'm like, okay, let's see what happens. But listen, 2 weeks down the road, if we're talking about this after London and Kyle Pitts has not gotten involved at all, I'm right there with you and asking those questions. And trust me, I'll be asking that question to Arthur Smith too.
Generally, I got to believe that, after the first game, okay, we get through the first game, you get through with all these new pieces that you have. And, of course, we still haven't seen, the full complement because we haven't seen Okudah yet. We haven't seen CP84. But you get through, relatively injury-free, and the team is kind of, coming together a little bit, seeing good stuff in the fourth quarter. Where would you say, Michael, that this team is as they go to Detroit on a confidence level? Because the first thing you got to do if you're going to be a winning team is you got to convince yourself in your own locker room.
Oh, I think that went a long way on Sunday. Guys I talked to a man, they said, listen, they looked around, they're down 12 points going into the fourth quarter. Not a lot is going well offensively at that point. And they all had this belief. Now, sure, they can say that because they won, right? But I buy that because there is this level of confidence with this team, with this coach, and the coach in the team and vice versa that really allows you. If he put it this way, this is all you need to know about the confidence level, I think, in that locker room and with that coaching staff right now. If Arthur Smith didn't believe in his team and his team did, and the team didn't quite believe in Arthur Smith, that fourth down play that ended up biting off another minute of the clock probably doesn't end up being successful. And then it's a completely different conversation.
Or maybe he doesn't even go for it.
Or he doesn't go for it and he kicks the field goal because, like, I don't know if I can get 1 yard with these guys. Like, we just see that all the time, right? And that also, don't forget, that also put a lot of faith in the defense too, because that's one of those momentum things, and whether you believe in momentum or not, different conversation. But that's one of those momentum things. You go for it, and it doesn't happen. That puts a lot of pressure on the defense because all of a sudden you lost, and you got to get a stop, otherwise the game's over. And you got to get a stop quick. And then even if you kick the field goal, that's putting a little bit more pressure on the defense of saying, I think I got you, defense, but I want to have more time just in case they get the ball real quick. Like, to me, I sit there and I think there's a very high level of confidence with this group right now. Listen, I've covered a lot of bad football, guys. I covered the Lions for 8 seasons when they were struggling. I've covered this team for 3. And I covered Michigan and Notre Dame and some of their low points before that. I've seen a lot of bad football. I can also tell you what a team that actually believes in themselves looks like, and this is what I have seen as a team that right now they believe in themselves. Now, that can change quick in the NFL, real quick. But right now, this team has a pretty high belief in what they have going on in the locker room and in their coaching staff.
I totally agree with you, Michael. And I think the veteran leadership, the Calais Campbells, all right, the Jesse Bates who've come into this locker room, all those guys help. I want to ask you about the defense before we let you go.
Sure.
Because you just mentioned Arthur and the mindset and do I need more time? Defense goes 3 and out, and then you get the stop on the last series to end the game. After, seemingly, we couldn't stop these guys. Like, they were going up and down the field. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, at the game, like, what's changed? Because this defense all of a sudden turned it on when it mattered in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, some of it. I mean, one was, frankly, a bad throw by Jordan Love on a third down that A.J. Terrell should have picked. Yep. And that ended up getting that first stop, right? Like, and then at that point, there's a little bit different pressure because now, like, that whole momentum thing. I'm a believer of in-game momentum. I don't necessarily buy it week to week. I certainly don't necessarily buy it season to season. But within a game, like, you can feel it. If you've played sports at all, you can feel that if you are that type of team, and especially in football. So to me, I look at it and I say, I think that third down play by A.J. Terrell breaking up that pass changed a lot. Now, a lot of people didn't talk about it. It was a small play, but it was a big play in terms of how it went because they get a first down. The Packers are able to bleed another 2 minutes off the clock even if they get that stop. So to tell you exactly what changed, I don't know. I think they were more aggressive. I think it goes back to that defensive line being pretty fresh on the whole. And it goes to Jordan Love's not a quarterback that has much more experience than Desmond Ridder. So, when Jordan Love got the ball back, all you need to do is put some pressure on him. And that's not a knock on Jordan Love. I actually was really impressed by Jordan Love. But he hasn't been in that situation yet. And until you do it, you don't totally know. And I think we saw that. And once they were in that situation, they were able to unload a little bit more pressure. And by the way, guys, the secondary is pretty good. And that, I think, also goes into play of why this team is able to maybe do that because they have a secondary that they can cover a bit. And it'll be interesting what happens when Jeff Okudah does come back and whether they get better or there's kind of more of a baseline of him and Trey Flowers because A.J. Terrell is playing fantastic right now. So I think that whoever's at that spot, whether it's Okudah or Trey Flowers, is going to get a lot of attention.
I agree. Recognize Atlanta. AJ is balling out. Michael, it's good to have you on, man. Micheal Rothstein. Make sure you follow him, guys, and check out his stuff. He covers our Falcons for ESPN. We will talk to you soon, buddy. Take care.
Hey, anytime, y'all. Have a great day.
All right,
You
thanks,
too.
Michael.